Welcome in, everybody, to this Kansas City Chiefs live stream presented by Bleacher Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and over the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the Kansas City Chiefs' recent roster cuts. This live stream is long overdue. I know the chat's probably going bonkers because this chat was saying, where's the stream? Where's the stream? It was initially set to go off at 3 because we were supposed to have the Kansas City Chiefs' final 53-man roster. Unfortunately, the Chiefs never do anything by the book, and we do not have the full 53-man roster. So this live stream is going to be a lot of guessing as to how many position groups they keep guys at. I mean, we have a couple guys that are cut, and we're going to talk about those guys and also talk about some of the guys that made this team because we have a lot of surprises, some guys that are not so surprising, and I'm just excited to get into it. So why don't we go over the players that the Chiefs cut? The first guy they cut was Joshua Kando, defensive end Joshua Kando. They waived him, which was kind of a surprise because they drafted him fairly, high a couple years ago. Defensive tackle Phil Hoskins, they waived him. Safety Deon Bush and defensive lineman Danny Shelton were both released. Cornerback Reese Taylor was waived. Cornerback Echo Boydo, K-State cornerback, was waived. Linebacker Cole Christensen was waived. Safety Anthony Cook was also waived. QBs Shane Buechele and Chris Oladokun, they were waived. And we're going to talk about those guys specifically after we go through the list because I was kind of surprised to see Shane Buechele not make this team. Offensive lineman Sebastian Gutierrez was waived. Running back Deneric Prince was another guy that got, unfortunately cut from this team. Defensive tackle Daniel Wise was waived. Cornerback Khalef Halasi, he was the guy in the preseason that a lot of Chiefs fans were pretty high on. Kind of surprised that he didn't make the team, but he'll probably be on the practice squad. Running back LaMichael Perine was also waived. He had a great preseason, but apparently didn't make the cut. Center Austin Ryder was released, and tight end Kendall Blanton was waived. That is the list of players that we have that we know for a fact are not going to make this team. Guys that we know will make this team. Justin Ross, wide receiver Justin Ross, is going to make this team, and he just deserves it. He had a great preseason, a great training camp. He's been injured the past couple seasons, but he's really put it all together in this offseason. And if you've watched any of the preseason, you would know that Justin Ross was basically a lock to make this team after the first preseason game. After that, game against the Saints where he had a touchdown, he looked really good in his route running. For me, I thought it was a guaranteed thing that Justin Ross was going to make this team. Now, it really sucks that we don't have a full 53-man roster to look at and see which players made the team at what positions and how many players that were carrying at those positions. I think we're probably going to carry 6 wide receivers, maybe 7. Maybe 7. But again, I don't know that because we haven't seen the final 53-man roster. But the fact that Justin Ross made this team, it's such a great thing. And like I said, the Chiefs were busy today. We made a couple trades. They traded Amir Smith-Marset to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 7th-round pick swap. And they just traded an interdivision trade with the Las Vegas Raiders. They just got a defensive tackle. And I will look up his name really quickly. I've been scrambling all over the place, guys, trying to get names and just trying to make the most of this 53-man roster that we don't have yet. So let's go down and see who the Chiefs traded for. I should have this, but, it has been a long day with not a lot of information. I would really appreciate the Chiefs to, let us in a little bit more about what's going on. But that's the Chiefs, guys. The Chiefs are always very secretive, and it's no surprise that they don't make it easy for us as content creators, as analysts, that they don't give us the full 53-man roster when it's supposed to come out. So the guy that they acquired via trade is defensive tackle Neil Farrell Jr. More depth at the defensive line and specifically the defensive tackle position. And I think that that's definitely a good thing to have. Without Chris Jones reporting yet, I think it's great to have that depth at the defensive line. And a guy like Charles Omenihu, who's a defensive end, isn't going to play for the first 6 games of the season. So you're going to need guys that can come in, fill in, and I think that this guy from the Raiders is definitely a quality candidate for that job. So let's talk about some of the guys that got cut that were kind of surprising and probably shouldn't have got cut. Josh Kaindoh getting cut surprised me. I thought that he'd make the roster, low down on the roster. I mean, he was never really high on the depth chart, but cutting him was a surprise. I still think that once he clears waivers, he'll probably be on the practice squad. In fact, I'd be shocked if he wasn't on the practice squad. But let's talk about a guy that I don't want to say I'm completely shocked that he didn't make this team, but I am surprised. Shane Buechele, quarterback Shane Buechele, who was fighting for that backup quarterback position with Blaine Gabbert, ended up losing that job to Blaine Gabbert, which by itself I don't think is a big surprise. I didn't think that Shane Buechele was going to outright beat Blaine Gabbert for the backup quarterback job, but I'm kind of surprised the Chiefs didn't take 3 quarterbacks. The Chiefs, who have basically been, grooming Shane Buechele to be the potential backup quarterback of the future, he's no longer going to be that guy. He's going to go somewhere else and probably have a chance to either make it on their practice squad or back up some other quarterback in this league. And so I'm kind of confused why they let the development of Shane Buechele go on for so long if they knew all along that they weren't going to have him as a potential backup for Patrick Mahomes. Once the Chiefs signed Blaine Gabbert in free agency, I absolutely knew that Shane Buechele was not going to be the backup quarterback for this team, but I am really surprised that he didn't make it. I thought that they would at least carry him as the third quarterback on this team. The Chiefs cutting Chris Oladokun didn't really seem surprising. He's going to be back on the practice squad. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Running back to Deneric Prince, I mentioned it a couple days ago when I made a first 4 in to the Chiefs team and a first 4 out, guys that I thought would make the team and wouldn't make the team. I had it between Deneric Prince and LaMichael Perine. Both guys didn't make the team, which I'm going to go on a rant about that here in a minute. But honestly, Deneric Prince not making this team wasn't the biggest surprise because as training camp started to end and the preseason ramped up, we started to see him make less noise. And Deneric Prince made a lot of noise at the beginning of training camp. But in the preseason, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't getting a lot of run with the ones, and he was mainly used on special teams with the ones. So when you see a guy like Deneric Prince or even LaMichael Perine for that matter get a majority of their snaps in the third and fourth quarter, it's not a good sign that they're going to make the team. And I think it's frustrating because I think that both Deneric Prince and LaMichael Perine offer more to the Chiefs running back group than Clyde Edwards-Helaire does. Because, again, unfortunately, we don't have the Chiefs' final 53-man roster, but I'm assuming that it's Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire as your 3 running backs on this roster. The fact that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still on this team in 2023 is infuriating. I just don't get it. I think we've seen everything there is to see with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's not going to come out this season and magically prove us wrong. He's a third running back on this team, and probably most of the time he's going to be hovering between the practice squad and the active roster. They might just deactivate him, kind of like what they did last year with I can't even think of his name, Melvin Gordon and Rojo. The Chiefs just don't. The Chiefs don't need 3 running backs, and right now I'm surprised that they took Clyde over a guy like Deneric Prince and LaMichael Perine because they both offer more in terms of overall, worth than Clyde Edwards-Helaire does. Both those other guys would play special teams. Clyde Edwards-Helaire does not play special teams, and so that's why it is so frustrating that we just continue to hold on to a glimpse of hope that Clyde Edwards-Helaire turns out to be something. So I'm reading the comments, guys. Again, we do not have the final 53-man roster for the Kansas City Chiefs. We're just kind of going down a list of guys that we know got cut. We don't know the exact guys that made the team outside of a few candidates like Justin Ross, who Nate Taylor of The Athletic reported was going to be on the team. But kind of getting back to the position groups, the Chiefs entered the preseason with a lot better of a wide receiver room than I gave them credit for. I did not think that they were that good, and they surprised me. They had a lot of guys that showed up and showed out, and you were able to turn a UDFA in Amir Smith-Marset into, I guess it wasn't a UDFA, but a free agent in Amir Smith-Marset into a 7th-round draft pick. That's the kind of stuff that you love to see, because not only do the Chiefs get compensation for that pick or for that player, but now Amir Smith-Marset has a chance to go to Carolina, play with Bryce Young, and there's not a long list of wide receivers ahead of him on the depth chart. So he could actually do something in Carolina. So great for him. But in this system, it just wasn't going to work out. And that's why I so desperately want to see the Chiefs' final 53-man roster, because I want to see if Justin Watson made it. We know Justin Ross made it, but Justin Watson was a guy that everybody had the Chiefs taking because he was an Andy Reid favorite and a guy that Patrick Mahomes has a lot of trust with. But I might have taken Amir Smith-Marset or Nico Remigio over a guy like Justin Watson, because Watson is very limited in his skill set. You kind of know what you're going to get from him. And the other guys showed a lot more potential. And so I would have preferred to maybe pick one of the younger guys, but I understand that the Chiefs value experience. They value that veteran leadership and just veteran presence. So again, we don't know the final 53, but if I was to guess, if I was to assume, the Chiefs are going to have 6 wide receivers. I guess let's go down the list. We got Sky Moore. We have Kadarius Toney, MVS, Richie James, Justin Ross, Rashee Rice. That's 6, and 7 would be Justin Watson. Assuming that they take 7, they'll probably only take 3 tight ends now with Travis Kelce, Blake Bell, and Noah Gray. I have a hard time thinking that they're going to take a 4th tight end if they're taking 7 wide receivers. A guy that they also released, which we talked about it. They released Danny Shelton, which means that Tershawn Wharton's going to make this team, even though he is still injured. But man, there was just not really a lot of, super big decisions that I think the Chiefs did completely wrong. I think that the Chiefs probably should not have kept Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I really understand why they did that. I know some people are saying that the final title for this live stream is Chiefs' final 53-man roster. That's what it is. Unfortunately, the Kansas City Chiefs did not make it easy on us, and so we do not have the final 53. Once we get that, we'll definitely let you guys know who made the team, how many players were taken at each position. But if I was to assume the Chiefs are going to take 2 quarterbacks, they're going to take 7 wide receivers, they'll take 3 tight ends, 3 running backs, because I have a hard time thinking that they're not going to do that. And defense, I think that guys like, even though we don't know if DiCaprio Bootle got cut, which let me go check that. DiCaprio Bootle hasn't officially been cut, but he's not making this team. So I really do think that, once we get a better picture of what the final 53-man is, once we get the official word on what it is, we'll have a lot more to discuss in terms of if the Chiefs made the right decision. But I think if we just look at it from face value, I think you can question what the Chiefs did in terms of, how they handled the Shane Buechele situation. Was it wise to develop this guy just to have him cut a couple of years later? Was it wise to keep Clyde Edwards-Helaire when LaMichael Pirine and Deneric Prince have been substantially better in both preseason and training camp? And it just kind of feels like the only reason that they've kept Clyde this long is because he was a first-round draft pick, and they're kind of forced to keep him. Was that the right decision? I don't think it was. Was it the right decision to release a guy like Danny Shelton when Tershawn Wharton still has ACL problems? And right now your defensive line is a big question mark without Chris Jones. These are the type of questions that I'm trying to find the answers to, and in time we'll find out. But it's really interesting because the Chiefs had to make sacrifices. That's the terrible part about the preseason, is that you got to make some tough roster decisions. And Brett Veach has done a really good job of that in his time here, picking the right guys for this team. And everyone has fan favorites. The Chiefs have a couple guys like Echo Boydo was a K-State defensive back. A lot of people thought that he was going to make this team. But realistically, the Chiefs can only take so many DBs. And they have a pretty good young nucleus of talent. So a guy like Khalef Halasi and Echo Boydo, it was going to be really hard for them to make the final cut because the Chiefs already have guys like Chamari Connor, and I guess Najee Johnson is on IR right now. But outside of Chamari Connor, you got L'Jarius Sneed and Just a bunch of cornerbacks that Joshua Williams, and they just have too many guys at that position. And while I think that guys like Khalif Halasi and Eko Boydo had a really good camp and a pretty good preseason, they'll catch on somewhere else. The Chiefs are the defending and reigning Super Bowl champions. They have a very deep roster. And so a lot of the guys that got cut today, I guess unofficially cut because we haven't seen the final 53-man roster, but the guys that got cut today are more than likely going to end up somewhere in this league on another team. And that's great for them. But when you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you have this championship level expectation and you just have so much talent, guys like, Eko Boydo and Khalif Halasi, they're not bad players. Guys like LaMichael Perine and Deneric Prince, not bad players, could start on other NFL teams. But since the Chiefs have so much depth, since the Chiefs have so many guys that can play this game at a high level, it just doesn't make sense to try to keep everybody. They've released, you're on the wrong page. I'm reading some of the comments now, guys. Let's see. I am still looking for the active roster, seeing if they have done anything on Twitter. I appreciate everybody for sticking with me during this difficult time. In fact, I tweeted out on my personal Twitter at @DMichaelDarcy. I was like, hey, Chiefs, can you release the schedule so I can do my job? I mean, we don't have that clear line of communication, and so it does make it tough. I'm going to read this 53-man roster article from Charles Goldman. This might give us a better indication of who's on the final 53. I remember that he was the one that reported that I think it was like Danny Shelton got cut. But let's go over his list and see how accurate it is. And granted, we're still waiting for that report, but it's worth a shot at this point in time. So quarterback, the Chiefs are taking two of them, like I said, Patrick Mahomes and Blaine Gabbert, with the cut candidates being Shane Buechele and Chris Oladokun. Makes sense. They're taking three running backs. Also, like I said, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And they cut players like LaMichael Perine, Deneric Prince, and Jerrion Ealy. Jerrion Ealy was never going to make this team. And tight end, like I also said, they're going to take three. Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and Blake Bell. Cutting guys like Matt Bushman, Kendall Blanton, and Isaiah Gavings. 7 wide receivers. Guys, maybe I do know what I'm talking about because Charles Goldman has the Chiefs taking 7 wide receivers. Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, Rashee Rice, Richie James, and Justin Ross. All guys that I predicted would make this team. And Amir Smith-Marset, they traded him. And they cut guys like Cornell Powell, Nico Remigio, Ty Freifogel, Juwan Green, and Ty Scott. For the offensive line, the guys that are in, Donovan Smith, Joe Tooney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Jawan Taylor. Makes sense. Those are your starting offensive linemen. Nick Allegretti, Prince Tego Inago, Wanya Morris, Lucas Niang, and Mike Caliendo. I'm not sure if I agree with the Mike Caliendo pick. I think they'd probably give that job to Darian Kennard, a draft pick from last year. But the guys that Goldman has cut are Darian Kennard, Austin Ryder, which we do know that Austin Ryder got cut, Jerome Carvin, Sebastian Gutierrez. Gutierrez also got cut, and Jason Godric. So let's get over to the defensive line. He has George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Felix Anudike Uzama, Malik Herring, BJ Thompson, Neil Farrell Jr., the guy they just traded for, Derek Nottie, Matt Dickerson, Tershawn Wharton, and Keandre Coburn. Again, unfortunately, they cut guys like Danny Shelton, Joshua Kando, Phil Hoskins. We know that. We haven't heard any word on Truman Jones, we did hear about Daniel Wise and Chris Williams. I think that sounds good for the defensive line because I like the idea of keeping BJ Thompson, a draft pick from this past year. He's got a lot of potential. But overall, that defensive line, it's pretty thin. It's pretty thin. Getting to the linebackers, he has the Chiefs taking 6 linebackers: Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill, Willie Gay Jr., Leo Chenal, Cam Jones, and Jack Cochran. We know that Cochran did not make the – actually, we haven't heard about Cochran. Cole Christensen and Ola Futakasi, never even heard that name, had gotten cut, according to Goldman. Cornerback, the Chiefs will take 5 of them: L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, and Nick Jones. Nick Jones broke his fingers early on in training camp. I still think he's going to make this team. He was a draft pick, and he actually looked good when he was able to play. L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, and Joshua Williams, in my mind, are automatic guaranteed roster spots. Those are easy. And cut, we know that Echo Boydo is cut, DiCaprio Bootle, Khalif Halasi, Reese Taylor, Lamar Jackson, and Deron Lowe. We know that Echo Boydo, Khalif Halasi, and Reese Taylor were cut. We're still waiting on word from DiCaprio Bootle and Lamar Jackson. Let's see, getting to the safety position, he has Justin Reed, Brian Cook, Mike Edwards, and Shamari Connor. And the cut candidates, Deion Bush, Anthony Cook, and Isaiah Norman. We know that Deion Bush and Anthony Cook were both cut, so safe to say that he was probably very spot on with that as well. And special teams, no surprise, Harrison Butker, Tommy Townsend, and long snapper James Winchester. So I think for the most part, again, I want to say that that was not the official final 53-man roster. That was our best guess based on the players that we have information on already being cut. I think it checks out. The Chiefs are going to take 2 quarterbacks, 7 wide receivers, 3 running backs, and 3 tight ends. And for the offense, I think that makes a lot of sense. Am I kind of surprised that they didn't take a 4th tight end or maybe swap out Clyde for another running back? Kind of. But we don't know what goes on inside the office of Brett Veach, what he knows, what he doesn't know. And I think that they might try to trade Clyde Edwards-Helaire here in the next couple weeks, and that might open up a spot for LaMichael Perine or Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Deneric Prince to make this roster as the 3rd running back, because I just kind of have a hard time thinking that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to play a full season with the Kansas City Chiefs going off of last season when he really didn't play at all. And I just have a hard time thinking that the Chiefs are going to not waste a roster spot, but waste a roster spot on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let me try to read some of the chat. Again, guys, thank you for bearing with me. I just got word that we did get the official 53-man roster. So you guys are going to have the treat of getting that roster unveiled. I would have really loved to get this email about 19 minutes ago. But hey, now we have the official 53-man roster. So why don't I stop sharing my screen? Stop sharing my screen. And I will pull up the official 53-man roster from the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's do that. Thank you, everybody, for the patience. I know this has been all over the place, but I think that we have a pretty good idea of who is going to make the final cut. All righty. Chiefs 2023 roster down to NFL mandated 53. It's about time. Let's go over the released players. Again, this is the official 53-man roster. We have finally gotten the word. I'm going to read over all of the released and waived players and talk about who made the final 53-man roster. This is all according to the Kansas City Chiefs website. The Chiefs released tight end Kendall Blanton, defensive back Deion Bush, center Austin Ryder, nose tackle Danny Shelton. They waived players like defensive back DiCaprio Bootle, defensive back Echo Boydo, quarterback Shane Buechele, tight end Matt Bushman, linebacker Cole Christensen, defensive back Anthony Cook, running back Jerrion Ealy, wide receiver Ty Freifogel, wide receiver Isaiah Gavings, tackle Chukwuebuka Godric. Never heard of him. Never will probably hear about him again. Wide receiver Jawan Green. Tackle Sebastian Gutierrez. Defensive back Khalif Halasi. Tackle Anderson Hardy. Defensive tackle Phil Hoskins. Defensive back Lamar Jackson, not to be confused with Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson. Defensive end Truman Jones. Defensive end Joshua Kando. Tackle Darian Kennard. Interesting to see him on that list. Defensive back Deron Lowe. Defensive back Isaiah Norman. Quarterback Chris Oladokun. Running back LaMichael Perine. Wide receiver Cornell Powell. Running back Deneric Prince. Wide receiver Ty Scott. Defensive back Reese Taylor. Defensive tackle Chris Williams. And, the Kansas guy, unfortunately, did not make the team, in defensive end Daniel Wise. The waived players, guard Jerome Carvin. Linebacker Olakun Fatkusi. Nico Remugio, the wide receiver, got waived, traded to the Panthers earlier today. Amir Smith-Marset, reserve / did not report. Chris Jones, of course, had to make the list. And acquired via trade with the Raiders, Neil Farnell, defensive tackle from Louisiana State. So now we have the waived players, and that basically is that is a good indicator. We now have a official 53-man roster to look at, and I think the article from Charles Goldman and my thoughts were pretty on the money. Those were both fairly accurate, and it's good to see that our beliefs were confirmed, but it also kind of sucks to see guys like Shane Buechele and Michael Perine and Deneric Prince not make this team. Cornell Powell, he'll probably be back on the practice squad. It's tough. It's really tough to see guys that could have made this roster not make it. Joshua Kando, we spoke about it earlier in the stream. He'll be a practice squad defensive end, but I wonder which guys are going to be able to bring back and which guys are going to get stolen, because the Chiefs, like I said earlier, have such a stacked roster that other NFL teams go to the waiver wire and try to pick up guys the Chiefs have waived and cut. And so some of these guys might not last very long because they're hot commodities. They're popular guys that are going to go somewhere else. So I do think that for those guys, great. You got a shot to play in the NFL. And I think that go somewhere else and have a great career. But the Chiefs have their final 53, and they're going to take 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 7 wide receivers, which that was the question. Are they going to take 6 or are they going to take 7? The answer is they're going to take 7. And they're going to take 3 tight ends. And so for the offense, I think that makes sense, but I am kind of surprised to see them not take a 3rd quarterback, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is making this team. So there is definitely a lot of confusing stuff, but in time, I think that it will all make a lot of sense. And I'm excited to see how this team performs, because obviously they have the talent. They're the defending champions. They are one of the most stacked rosters in the NFL from top to bottom. 7 wide receivers, all guys that can come in and produce right away. That's an exciting thing. And I think the Chiefs have, what it takes both on offense and on defense to run this whole thing back next year. So that's really all I got for the final 53-man roster reveal. I know that we did not have the full roster until about 5 minutes ago, but our initial predictions of guys that we thought would get cut and the early reports of guys who did get cut, I think we were able to kind of get a pretty good indication now looking at the final 53-man roster of the guys that just were not good enough to make the cut. So until next time, guys, thank you for watching this stream. You can check me out on YouTube. That's at KC Sports Report. My personal Instagram and Twitter is at @TheMichaelDarcy. But definitely go check me out on YouTube at KC Sports Report. I cover the Chiefs both nationally and locally. And you can definitely check out all kinds of Chiefs content on YouTube. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching this Bleacher Report live stream. I've been your host, Michael Darcy. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.